Hello everyone, coming to you again with my final Disney versus original work before I take a break. I apologize that my computer had to go under repair, but it was not working properly, but now it's doing fine and it's up and running. So I am going to basically do my Disney versus original work video, and then later on after that, once I post that, I am going to be doing my review of a regular movie. And then what I plan to do is for tomorrow is to basically do my last random video, which will be my last random video and video as a whole for a while. And I'll go into depth as to what to expect and such, and just be discussing random things. So that'll basically be up and running. But nonetheless, let us discuss Aladdin. Yes, I am ending on Aladdin. Now, whether you dislike or like Aladdin, depends on probably various different factors, but the Disney version offers an interesting take into sort of the Arab-like world. For the most part, we've seen, as far as Disney princess movies go, ones that take place in fairly familiar Western locales, in particular Europe and such. So it's really interesting to finally have a Disney princess movie that takes place somewhere else. And I think Jasmine is probably the first one that's actually of a different racial and ethnic background, which is rather interesting. But the interesting thing is that this film, as well as the original work, doesn't really focus on Jasmine as much, even though the Disney work does give her a more bigger chunk of a role than the original work does, which I'll get into. But basically what you have to know going in and to understanding kind of how these two works are structured is that Aladdin itself, as far as the original work is concerned, is one of the Middle Eastern folk tales in the book of 1001 Arabian Nights. It doesn't say specifically if there's an author. I believe the author's name is still unknown from what I can tell from my research. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But what you have to understand is that 1001 Arabian Nights are a collection of folk stories sort of passed down from generation to generation. And Aladdin happens to be one of those. And I believe the other tales include the Sinbad character in particular, and I think there might be other works that include Aladdin, but we're strictly going to talk about Aladdin because that is the only tale that the Disney version pulls things from. So they basically describe and sort of open up in a similar way, and not both Disney and original work, but I believe the original work kind of makes Aladdin sort of this more young, kind of blank slate, that it's yeah, he's poor and he's young, but he kind of he's kind of not really given much, I mean, as far as personality, from what I could tell. It does seem like in the Disney work they really tried to introduce the character. However, I think the original work is probably more plot-based in how the magic is, and more interested in how the magic is structured and such than really the characters. So the Disney work, I think, uses the lack of characterization in the original work and tries to really bring that to light in Aladdin, because you really see in the opening and in the beginning how he's struggling to being this common poor, or well, common for the time being poor, common poor young boy, and at the same, or young man, and at the same time he he also just kind of deals with the fact that he doesn't have a lot of power, but at the same time he does give whatever he has in the form of stealing to those who are less fortunate, sort of like a Robin Hood, you could say, especially in the beginning when he gives it to the kids, which I always think is cute. But in particular bread. But the original work is kind of odd in how it opens up, because basically it opens up in a Chinese town, which I thought was rather interesting because Chinese and Arab towns are different, right? But I guess according to this work, it ends up opening up in a Chinese town, unlike in the Disney work where it sort of opens up in this Arab-like town. Agrabah. Unless you count the sort of intro in the beginning where you kind of see the villain and you're already introduced to Jafar. Like, literally, those are one of the first people we see, besides Robin Williams, who does this voice of the kind of narrator in the beginning. I guess comedic narrator, you could say. But in the original work, it opens up in this Chinese town, and basically Aladdin is recruited by this sorcerer. And I only put quotation marks under sorcerer because sorcerer in this case means Jafar. The original work does not give Aladdin's the antagonist in the Aladdin story any name. He's just called sorcerer. Not given any specific name whatsoever. And he is just fairly manipulative in the same way as Jafar sort of is. I think Jafar, though, has a lot more to work with, though, especially considering the fact that he actually works within the palace. You'll notice that in the Disney work, that he actually is part of the Emperor's crowd, and he sort of blends himself in that way. But this sorcerer seems fairly wide open to being a bad guy, because he doesn't have some kind of connection to anybody who's maybe good or has some form of disguise, really. He's just kind of out there in the open, and he basically manipulates Aladdin, saying that he's somehow his brother of his late father, Quasim. And I guess Aladdin totally falls for it and says, "Yep, that's you. Yeah, that's definitely you." And the interesting thing, though, too, I found, is that they actually give Aladdin a mother in the original work. The Disney work does not give Aladdin any parents whatsoever. But basically the sorcerer, in this case sorcerer meaning Jafar, meaning an antagonist, goes to basically Aladdin and his mother and sort of says, "Yeah, I'm going to make your son, wealthy." He just kind of just plays this manipulative card, like, yeah, I'm going to, be the one that gives him something, because again, they are fairly poor, so it would make sense that people who are of poor means would probably be manipulated more easily than those who maybe have high wealth and standards during that time. But clearly this isn't really displayed in the Disney work, considering the fact that Aladdin's probably, even though he is manipulated sort of in the beginning in a similar way, which I'll get into, it doesn't seem like that it's to the point where all of the good people are sort of manipulated in the Disney work. Like, you'll see how Jasmine's fairly critical of Jafar, and you'll even see too how, even though the Emperor, who's played mostly for comic relief in the Disney version, which is Jasmine's father, it does seem to toy with the whole concept of manipulation, but the characters do feel smart enough to be fairly sure of themselves, even when sometimes they do mess up and they do get manipulated at points. In particular, the Emperor, as you will see with Jafar using sort of his magic. And you'll see that with Aladdin too, when Jafar disguises himself and comes into the jail cell and kind of goes, yeah, I can make you rich and stuff. But it seems like here it's fairly odd, and it seems almost like you almost think as a viewer, why would Aladdin and his mom fall for this? Especially when they haven't even met the guy and he just comes up and says, yep, I'm your name's Aladdin, right? I'm your brother, believe me. But the whole motive, though, which is fairly similar in the Disney work with Jafar from the sorcerer in the original work, is to get this oil lamp. And in order to get this oil lamp, they have to go to the Cave of Wonder. Disney calls it the Cave of Wonders, but then in the original work it's just called Cave of Wonder. But really it's that whole same concept, and he basically just convinces Aladdin, yep, come with me so I can make you rich. Just go down and find me this oil lamp. And then after the sorcerer attempts to basically double-cross him in the double-cross Aladdin in the original work, Aladdin ends up being stuck in the cave, similar to the Disney work where we see how Jafar he thinks he takes the lamp and then kind of pushes them all down, including Abu, which is Aladdin's monkey, and there is no monkey in the original work, so totally scrapped. Magic carpet's not in there either, so none of that in the original work. It's fairly straightforward. Aladdin just goes down there alone. And basically, the funny thing is that the original work is that Aladdin is given this magic ring actually by the sorcerer as a form of protection. And since he's kind of in despair and not sure what to do because he's stuck in a cave, he rubs his hands, and then in doing so he ends up rubbing the ring that he's wearing, and this ultimately is where we are introduced to the first genie. Now this is the first genie in the original work. There are two genies in the original work. Disney only has got Robin Williams. That's all you got in the Disney work, and he comes out because of the oil lamp. Original work, there's a ring, and this ring ends up sprouting the first genie. Now the first genie basically takes him home to his mom. He lets Aladdin go back to his mom, basically in the form of the way of how Disney does it, except Aladdin does it more in a more of a sly dog way by going, oh yeah, ha ha ha, yeah, you're gonna get me out of here, and and he lets him out, even though he doesn't say ultimately I want to get out, so he doesn't really waste his wishes. So there's that. And we see how it does feel like too that in the Disney work there's a lot more personality from Robin Williams as the genie. He's a lot more like comedically meant, and I feel like in the original work they're more used as props for the most part, the genies, and I'll get into the second genie as I continue on explaining this plot. But since Aladdin really doesn't have any home to really go to, the genie ends up just taking him off to this island, I believe, in the Disney work. And it's also important to note that in the Disney work, in the way beginning, we're introduced to Jasmine as well, the princess. And she's given a whole story too, with how she wants to, you know, be out in there in the world and see things and do things, even though she can't because she's a princess and she's supposed to stay in the palace and supposed to marry some old brute. So we do see that happen, and we do see that really unfold, but none of that happens in the original work. From everything that I've explained up to this point, nothing with Jasmine's character happens, but she is introduced and she has a different name, but I'll explain that once I get into it. But I'm just trying to explain certain aspects of the Disney version because it seems like they added a lot more in. Again, similar to with Beauty and the Beast, it feels like that they're taking these fairly simplistic stories and just playing with them and trying to make more and add more in and make, you know, make more characters like a Boo and the magic carpet and bringing in Iago too as a comic relief to the villain. So you see that as well, that the Disney version really does try to take the basics but make a lot more incorporated within the plot, and a lot more to the point where we feel that the characters are essentially more identifiable, I guess, to our time, again, like Jasmine and Aladdin and such. So basically, once Aladdin comes back home, he has the lamp with him that he was supposed to originally get, and basically his mother tries cleaning it, and then that's when we see the second genie come up. And this genie is the one who helps Aladdin get rich and powerful and gives him the capability of marrying Princess Baldur, the Emperor's daughter. And again, she's held the same title as the Disney version, except she's called Princess Baldur instead of Princess Jasmine. And I can kind of see why Disney changed the name because the name is hard to pronounce. I mean, I think kids would just be so lost with her name. So I think making it shorter would have worked to their advantage too, but I don't know how they could have shortened it to make it seem, I guess, identifiable and easy to remember. But yeah, I mean, it does seem like, though, that in the original work, Jasmine is not given a more independent female role here. Especially when already the original work says that they end up getting married. And the interesting thing too is that the Disney work kind of makes it so that Aladdin's supposed to sort of learn a lesson and learn beyond the means of wealth. And in the original work, it kind of doesn't really play out that way. And hi, I'll come and watch soon. Yeah, I mean, I just don't really see the lesson really in the original work being presented. It doesn't feel like that what Aladdin's getting is really ultimately leading up to any forms of consequences so much, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of I guess you could say stakes in the original work, and I'll get into explaining that why and how I think the Disney work kind of tries to drift away from the sort of details that the original work gets into. But basically, the sorcerer ends up finding out that Aladdin has the lamp, and he's married to this rich princess, okay, and he's rich himself. I need to get my hands on this lamp now. And basically he ends up tricking the princess into, and she's basically unaware of his character at all. Like, she does not develop a relationship whatsoever with Jafar. You'll see how in the Disney work, Jasmine is constantly on nag with this guy. She does not like him whatsoever. And she, like, really asserts her authority, and she makes herself fairly open and out there and sassy with him. She does not, you know, she treats him like how maybe a woman in business would treat somebody who's of a male authority of a lower position. Like, she is, like, not messing around. I mean, she just has this attitude about her. But this princess is just she's just dumber than a second coat of paint, and she goes she goes, okay, I'll take a new lamp, because basically he asks her, can I have your old lamp and exchange it for a new one? And they basically negotiate it that way. And she totally falls for it and just goes, yep, okay, have this lamp and I'll get a new one. And then once he has the lamp, he now has the authority of the authority to boss around the genie. And basically he orders the contents of the home along with the palace to be moved to the place basically where I guess he lives, which I think is where it actually, the original work starts out within that Chinese town called Maghreb. And basically the interesting thing though is that in the Disney work it plays with the whole concept of, yeah, he wants the whole palace, and he wants, you know, power and the wealth, but it doesn't seem like this villain, the sorcerer, really goes beyond that. All he wants is just his wishes, and then the riches and the money, which is what he initially wanted to begin with. But the interesting thing though is that in the Disney version it is fairly hinted at in the beginning that Jafar really wants to have dominance and power and basically take the place of the emperor. It doesn't feel like in the original work that that this character really wants to take the place of the emperor. He's just more of a common, you know, rundown schmuck who just wants money. He's not really this power hungry sorcerer that can, you know, really do anything. He's just kind of he's just kind of a common manipulating, you know, vagabond, really. He's not really somebody who has these kinds of has a kind of position again within authority like Jafar does. And you don't see him incorporating himself with the other characters so much, because again, he's completely removed from that seat of power. He really doesn't have a lot of authority, so he doesn't really come off as this kind of threat so much. And the stakes in which what he wants doesn't really make it seem so so high. And unlike in the Disney work, where Jafar actually orders Aladdin to be sent off somewhere, like to just kick him out and take everybody prisoner, in the original work, Aladdin still has, though, the ring, and the ring holds the other genie. And the thing is what you have to understand is that the ring is actually a lesser genie, meaning that he doesn't have as a lot of power or maybe magic as the genie within the lamp that the sorcerer has. But he's able to transport Aladdin to the place where the sorcerer wanted the palace to be, Maghreb, and basically, I guess the sorcerer ends up taking his wife too, and in the process, Aladdin sort of returns and, you know, saves the day and defeats the sorcerer, and he ends up dying, I guess. But I'll get into explaining, you know, how that ultimately comes about. But for the most part, it seems like that's how really really the only thing that really happens in the original work, as far as getting from the introduction to the climax to sort of our conclusion here, sort of. But in the Disney work, Aladdin is kicked off to some other place with Jafar's magic, and with the help of his carpet. Now, the carpet really plays a significant role too, because it saved Aladdin's butt so many times. I mean, I could probably count how many times that carpet has just been so useful. That carpet is just awesome. I love that carpet. I think the carpet is probably one of the more interesting characters. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't do he doesn't really emote anything, but you can just tell by the way he's drawn and just how he initiates whenever Aladdin needs help. It's just an awesome sidekick to have. Like, I would love that carpet so much. He literally just comes and he saves Aladdin when he's falling from the cave. He saves, because that's where they end up meeting, the carpet actually. He saves Aladdin when to go and save everybody else, you know, basically from the cold, because Jafar sends him off somewhere in like the middle of nowhere where it's freezing, and then sends him back to Agrabah. And really, the whole moving of the palace, all the genie does is take it and put it on a hill. Unlike the original work where it's taking it to a completely different location, it seems like that the Disney work tries to make it seem more like, oh, he's just trying to make it more powerful, and ooh, because really all Jafar's goal is just really to rule. He just wants power. That's all he wants. But unlike in the Disney work, where again it's just more of a greed motivation, it's more of a self-worth motivation than a power-hungry motivation. And really, it plays out in that same way in the Disney work, except in the Disney work we actually see Jafar meaning the sorcerer in this case, when we're talking about the Disney version. He actually decides, I'm going to actually I am going to ask myself to become even more powerful than just being, you know, the most powerful person, I guess, in Agrabah. He wants to be the most powerful genie, I guess, and Aladdin sort of manipulates him in doing this in the climax, and kind of tells him, you know, look at the genie. You know, you're never gonna be as powerful as him. You know, look at what he's capable of doing. And Jafar sees this and totally falls for it and goes, yep, okay, genie, make me the most powerful genie ever. And the genie, being the Robin Williams genie, goes, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And basically you have him become a genie, but the problem is that genies are really prisoner to lamps, and basically he just kind of becomes a prisoner, and Iago is the one who takes him with him. And also the important thing you have to understand in the Disney work is the way that Jafar gets the lamp from Aladdin. is just by having Iago get it. Yeah, Iago just comes in and is like, oh, there's the lamp, let me go get it, and I'll leave now. It's not really requires that much manipulation to get that lamp. But in the end, that's kind of how just Jafar's defeated in the Disney work, and you know, he's not even killed, he's just like kicked off somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And then they all kind of live all happily ever after. And the Disney work, again, compiles a lot of other details, but these are really the basics when it comes to how it sort of ties in within the original work. But the original work sort of continues with the sorcerer, because what ends up happening is that the sorcerer has actually a more powerful and evil brother, and he basically figures out that I guess his brother died, so he wants revenge. And so he disguises himself as an old woman, and and he basically fakes that whole idea that he has somehow healing powers. And then the princess is all like, yeah, you can come in, yeah, you can come in and stay, and and this princess, I'm sorry, but this princess in the original work is just not helping. Like, she ends up getting everybody into these bad circumstances. It's kind of depressing, because Jasmine is the one trying to prevent anything from happening, and this girl just ends up walking right into it. But in the end, Aladdin is warned by the genie regarding this supposed woman, even though it is a guy, and basically they end up killing the imposter, meaning the sorcerer's more powerful, more evil brother. And then eventually Aladdin accedes the throne and becomes sort of the emperor. So yes, that's really how the original work plays itself out. It doesn't seem like, again, that really there's a lot of growth within Aladdin from the plot, and it just doesn't seem like in the original work he really does learn anything. But in the Disney work, I think it is more emphasized that, you know, you shouldn't think that your wealth can buy you everything. There is this whole emphasis on, you know, that caring and loving someone is more important than how much money you've got in your back pocket. Really, that's the whole point of the Disney version. And Jasmine is given a lot more time. She's given a lot more characterization, and she's just a lot more of an interesting figure within this particular tale. But in the original work, she's sort of played up as a prop to end up causing havoc, again, being the one being manipulated to trade lamps, and being the one manipulated into thinking that somehow this man that's disguised himself as a woman is a woman. So yeah, her character is probably going to be a downer for some people, because she ends up really causing all the problems, really. And people might, I think, be down on the original work too, because of the fact that it doesn't seem like Aladdin really does anything to change or grow. Because in the Disney work, we actually see him sacrifice his last wish so that the genie can ultimately be free. And there's no mention of this in the original work, that he actually does this. But it does seem like that they do kind of form this relationship of trust, and I could see that the genie was initially on Aladdin's side, especially considering the fact that he told Aladdin about the evil brother. So really, it does seem ultimately that there is some kind of bond, there are some bonds within the original work, but I feel like the story is so fairly short that the Disney work had a lot more to go into, and had a lot more to, I think, work with to make it somehow feel a lot more like taking the simplicity of the story and making the characters a lot more, I guess, relatable than really the original work does. because it does feel like the original work is fairly basic in its most basic form. Kind of similar to, again, Beauty and the Beast, where you feel like the Disney work, really, they tried to make things a lot more, I guess, just bigger in scope than the simplicity of the original work. But I think they're both interesting, especially considering that they actually had another genie with a ring, which I thought was interesting. And I guess rubbing really does the trick. Rubbing, just rub stuff and hope that it somehow turns into a genie. But really, it does seem to have this kind of consistency within this world and within its magic that it creates in the original work. But it doesn't seem to have a lot of character, and it doesn't seem to have a lot of depth. But at its most basic level, it's sort of an interesting take on how somebody from a poor background can somehow be transformed into something more. And we kind of see this happen in both works. But again, the Disney work does have more thematic messages that apply to the idea that, you know, that money isn't everything. And it's kind of this, and it's not really the same with the original work, because it feels like the original work is just more taking a good versus evil idea, and that ultimately good people will end up being the ones with the money and the ones with the wealth, and those who are evil won't be the ones ending up with the money and the wealth. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of how you choose to interpret it. But ultimately, that's really all I can say about the original original work, as well as the Disney work. But again, Disney work's got a lot more details in there, a lot more scenes where you see Aladdin and Jasmine actually bond. In the original work, it doesn't seem like that they bond; they just get married, because now he's rich and he's able to. And again, there seems to be a lot more of a characterization with Jasmine than there is in the original work. But either way, it's still a princess movie, even though Aladdin is really the main focus. And I think that's really interesting that we finally get to see a prince at the forefront. And it would be nice if Disney did more of that kind of stuff. But I don't think they're doing any, like, fairy tales anymore, even though they're doing Frozen, which is still based upon, like, a fairy tale-ish original source material. But yeah, I think that's ultimately all I can say about these two works. And actually, Aladdin came out the second year, so right after Beauty and the Beast, 1992, what year I was born, was when Aladdin came out. I thought it came out in 94, but something slipped my mind. But I will be continuing this series. I hope to go through all of Disney's works. I've still got plenty more to do, and I'm really excited for it. You've got Hunchback still coming up, still going to look into that, still going to look into Tangled, plan to look into any of the other works that do have any original source material. I know for sure Tangled, as well as Tangled, and what was the other one that I mentioned? Oh, I totally lost myself. But for sure Tangled, and for sure some other works. Oh, and also Mulan probably as well, because I know that is based upon a poem. So hopefully I can use that as well. And yeah, we'll just have to see ultimately what happens, but I'm hoping that I can at least get 7 of them in. That's probably how it's going to work out, but I'll probably be discussing that in my random video, which I'll talk about on Monday. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say. Any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody.